Thank you for joining us on the program today. I am Anne Nwawado. Here's what's coming up on the world today. U.S. seizes oil tanker off coast of Venezuela as Caracas condemns act of piracy. U.S. President Donald Trump criticizes decaying European countries, calling the leaders weak. Plus, flu cases jump sharply in England as NHS faces worst-case scenario. Let's begin the world today. Once again, welcome. The United States has seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, making a new escalation in Washington's pressure campaign against President Nicolas Maduro's government. While President Donald Trump announced the move, calling it the largest tanker ever seized. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi described the vessel as a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. Caracas also quickly condemned the seizure as an act of international piracy. Earlier, President Maduro insisted that Venezuela will never become an oil colony.
People do it, but you see the result, and I guess they probably have released the pictures by now or pretty soon. You'll discuss that with the appropriate people later on, but no, it was seized for a very good reason. We want safety, we want security, we want to make sure we're not letting the wrong people come into our country. We're getting rid of a lot of bad ones from jails, from mental institutions, drug dealers. We're getting a lot of bad people, murderers. 11,888 murderers, half of them, almost exactly half of them, committed more than one murder. We're getting rid of them. In some cases, we don't even want to get them out. We put them in jail because we're afraid they're going to come back into our country. We're not going to let them back in. So.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has accused European countries of being weak and suggests that the U.S. may scale back support for Ukraine. In an interview, Mr. Trump claimed Europe had failed to control migration to take decisive steps to end the war, saying that they were letting Ukraine fight until they drop. In response to this, Britain's Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said that Europe was showing strength, highlighting defense investment and continued support for Kiev. She also says that both President Trump and President Zelensky were working for peace, while Russia's President Vladimir Putin was escalating the conflict with new drone and missile attacks. And we have political relations between Europe and U.S. as they hit a new low. Washington's scathing assessment of the continent in a new security review. Europe faces civilization pressure, and according to the document, and its disregard for European concerns and ceasefire talks in Ukraine are now driving frustrations with the Trump administration to new levels. We have our DW correspondent to answer these questions. Well, have political relations actually between Europe and the U.S. hit a new low, in your view?
That's right. We know that Europe is certainly accustomed to having arguments with this administration over the past 12 months, especially when we look at trade, when we look at the nature of military spending and burden sharing with NATO. However, what's happened over the past few months has really cast a much darker shadow over the continent and over transatlantic relationships. When we see Washington trying to rush through a ceasefire deal in Ukraine using a lot of Russian talking points, especially when it comes to things like Russian elections or giving over territory. When we see this strategy review that again borrows talking points not only from the Kremlin, but from populist parties that are gaining ground here in Europe. And then when we see this interview with Donald Trump on Tuesday, in which he again reiterated, Europe is decaying and really questioning the value of that alliance, that causes a lot of consternation here. So far, the responses from top European leaders have been more measured. most likely because they're focused on that ceasefire deal and the negotiations. We see the top EU diplomat Kaja Kallas saying she still sees a strong alliance between the two sides. We see German Chancellor Friedrich Merz saying that some of these complaints are, in fact, understandable. But we imagine that in private, the feelings are probably a lot harsher. Maybe they echo those of Josep Borrell. He is the predecessor to Kajas, and he tweeted on Tuesday that it's time for Europe to essentially see the U.S. as a kind of adversary.
Well, the Trump administration's harsh assessment, as we know, is also likely to find agreement in some corners of the continent. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is fair to say, and not just in remote corners. Populist parties have been doing well here in Europe, especially in recent years, and especially here in Germany over the past 12 months. When we look at the populist party, the AfD, Alternative for Germany, we see that it's polling now as the highest party and has been doing that for several months. This strategy review from the U.S. essentially borrows language from populist parties like the AfD, talking about civilizational erasure in Europe, really looking at Europe according to the amount of whiteness that's there and looking at anti-migrant, anti-asylum policies in nations like Hungary and Poland with praise. That's something that bothers a lot of people here. Not only that, but the strategy review says that it will also continue to cultivate resistance to what it sees as odious ideas across Europe. And that means that it will support those populist parties. And that's really problematic here in Europe, which sees those populist parties as undermining basic democratic rights and essential freedoms.
But Steve, are we seeing a slow motion rupture in the transatlantic relation as we know it?
I think when you look at the rest of that strategy review, one of the things that you understand is that this is an administration that is less interested in values and ideas-based alliances. And taking maybe the worst case outlook of the transatlantic alliance over the past decades, that is in essence what it has become, is a bit more values and ideas based. That is important, many would argue, as a kind of soft power support. That's what past administrations have supported. But this is an administration that really is interested in hard power transactional relationships and may have a much different view of the world than the one that's been encouraged over past administrations. And so I think even if you take the view that Trump himself is transactional and may not be interested in great ideological views of the transatlantic alliance, we see that there are definitely some within this administration that do have a very negative view of Europe, and not just one that's transactional. And I think that's the bigger concern for Europe going forward, is that there is, in fact, a kind of adversarial outlook on Europe that we see reflected in this review.
Thank you very much. DW's Steve Birdsley joining us to discuss this. Thanks a lot. Now, Australia has introduced a world-first ban blocking all children under 16 from using social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, X, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, and others. The new law, which came into effect on Wednesday this week, requires tech giants to remove existing underage accounts and stop new under 16 users from signing up. Companies that fail to comply face fines of up to 49.5 million Australian dollars. And according to the government, 86% of children aged 8 to 15 were using social media before the ban. The reactions in major European cities were mostly critical, with residents in Paris, London, and Madrid calling the move censorship and warning that teens could easily bypass it using VPNs. Others feared the policy could push young people into unsafe online spaces, while some said the European countries often follow Australia and the US on digital regulation.
It might be a government tool, like used to interfere, like how children should experience their lives in Australia. I think like it might probably be about like children nowadays, like they may over rely on social media in their lives. So maybe like I think the Australian government is trying to change that.
I feel like some of it could be linked to censorship, because I feel like everyone has a right to be able to look on social media and stuff to get information. And especially when it comes to things like TikTok, there is a lot of misinformation as well. But at the end of the day, I feel like everyone should have a right to use social media, especially when that's how a lot of people get their information on things and how people can communicate with each other. I feel like it shouldn't be banned for teenagers. I feel like there should be like more protection, but not with a full ban. I don't think that works.
It's completely about censorship. Children, whatever age, should be allowed to make their own minds up, and it's up to parents to supervise them. There are techniques people can use to help the children, but cutting off their rights to social media is cutting out a lot of their means to contact each other. I mean, after COVID, what happened then was people just shut down. Well, social media helped them get back. And so, yes, it's wrong. I'm against censorship anyway, and I think the Australian government, even though I'm British, I think they really need to rethink it. It's not protecting children, it is censorship.
No, you can't stop teens at all. They're ruthless. No, you cannot stop them at all. They will do anything they can to get past it. It is very scary, to be fair. It is very, very scary what they can do online as well, like scamming, explicit content. It's really not well. It's not good for their well-being, their mental health, especially the parents. Like, I can't imagine what their parents feel, honestly.
A lot of them will 100% find a way through it, but some won't. Like, there's VPNs, and you could use VPNs anywhere. You could connect to a different server, and they'll put you in a different country, and then you can access it. I don't know how they're gonna ban everyone. I don't know, but I reckon people will get around it easily.
I think they would need to look at it carefully before they do actually go down that route. But I think what we tend to find with what goes on, say, America, the United States, Australia, places like that, we tend to find that this country and Europe does sometimes follow fairly quickly.
Well, let's move to England, a country facing what health officials have called the worst case scenario as flu hospitalization surged by 55% in just 1 week. The NHS says that an average of 2,660 patients were hospitalized with flu last week, the highest level ever recorded for this time of the year. And health leaders are now asking anyone who feels unwell to wear masks at public transport, and some hospitals have already made masks mandatory. Officials have warned that the peak is not in sight, with a mutated flu strain also driving sharp rise in cases across Europe. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has called on vulnerable groups to get vaccinated without delay. And President Donald Trump has launched a new visa scheme offering fast-tracked U.S. citizenship to wealthy foreigners who pay at least $1 million. The Trump Gold Card promises a direct path to citizenship for qualified buyers who can provide what the administration calls a substantial benefit to the United States. Mr. Trump announced the move on social media, touting the card as a way for American companies to keep their invaluable talent. The scheme is coming amid a border and broader immigration crackdown, with the U.S. increasing visa fees and stepping up the deportations of undocumented migrants. And coming up after the break, Shanghai invites dog owners for a pet-only cinema screening. We'll bring you the details. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today on Channels Television. At least 34 people have been killed and dozens injured after airstrikes in Myanmar's military hit a hospital in western Rakhine state. The area is controlled by one of the country's most powerful ethnic forces fighting the military regime. Thousands have been killed and millions displaced since the army seized power in a 2021 coup, sparking a nationwide civil war. In recent months, the military has stepped up airstrikes to retake the territory and has also even deployed paragliders to drop bombs on enemy positions. Meanwhile, Botswana has imposed a import ban on some vegetables like tomato and potatoes from South Africa. And according to the country, this move is to encourage its citizens to buy local. In 2024, Botswana President Duma Boko lifted the imposed ban, which was implemented in 2021 by the previous administration, and the two neighboring countries form part of Southern African Customs Union, which was formed to promote free trade.
South Africa is part of SACU, which is the Customs Union, a trade bloc which includes South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Swaziland, and Lesotho. Amongst other things, this bloc ensures that there's free trade amongst these countries. There aren't tariffs and random blockage of products from moving from one country to the next, except, of course, there are certain national security risks. The bloc has been in existence for some time, since 1910, and in certain times it has undergone a period of review. But I think at the moment it does require a serious review for a number of reasons. One, because there are some countries in this bloc that continuously block South African products from being exported to those countries, particularly in agriculture. And the two countries that have continued with this practice is Botswana and Namibia. The key argument that all of these countries put on the table is that they want to increase their own domestic production, which is a fair thing, and we want countries to do that. But I do think that there is an appropriate way of doing that without completely shutting off trade and disrupting the value chains in this region. Disadvantages the consumers in these countries, the retailers, but also not thinking about the coordination in this region and respecting the rules of the game.
And search and rescue efforts still ongoing at the site of two-story buildings that collapsed in Fez in Morocco. The homes housed Wright families and crumbled without warning late Tuesday night. 16 survivors were pulled from the rubble and transported to a nearby hospital for treatment. The cause of that collapse remains unclear, and authorities are yet to determine how many people are still unaccounted for. Fez, Morocco's third largest city, is preparing to host matches for this month's Africa Cup of Nations, and it is among the venues selected for 2030 FIFA World Cup. Beyond its famed walled Medina and bustling medieval souks, the city is also home to some of the country's poorest neighborhoods, where aging infrastructure and deteriorating multi-family buildings are common. Let's head to Ghana now, where the country expelled 3 Israeli citizens after accusing Israeli authorities of mistreating and wrongfully deporting several Ghanaians who arrived in Tel Aviv last week. Well, the Ghanaian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement that the 3 Ghanaians were removed from Israel without justification and in conditions the ministry described as unacceptable. The Foreign Affairs Minister said the government had been compelled to act after what happened at Israel's Ben Gurion airport. And he says that both sides are now working to settle the issue diplomatically. The ministry also confirmed that Israel's Charge d'Affaires in Accra was summoned for discussions as the Israeli ambassador was out of the country at the time. And finally, cinemas across China are welcoming a new kind of moviegoer as theaters roll out pet-only screenings for Disney's hit animated sequel Zootopia 2, inviting dog owners to watch the film alongside their pets. This was the scene from the Shanghai cinema filmed on Wednesday. We see dogs settling into seats and on the laps of their owners, as well as playing in the lobby after the screening. One of the organizers said the screenings were designed to give dogs a different experience as Shanghai expands its pet tourism offerings. With Zootopia 2 topping China's box office, they say the title was a natural fit. Organizers also say the theaters in Beijing, Chengdu, and Shenzhen have introduced similar sessions, providing dogs with their own tickets, as well as their own diapers, pads, and wipes, as they can be civilized dogs when entering their cinema. On that very furry and beautiful note, we end the world's day. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Good evening.